In this presentation, we are going to talk about migration and identities of indigenous socio-cultural groups in French Guiana, a case study of students along the Oyapock and Maroni rivers. The authors of this research are Hidair, Senior Lecturer of the School of Teaching and Education of French Guiana, and Ailincai, Senior Lecturer and Director of the Teacher Training College at the University of French Polynesia. This article focuses on the contemporary identity of young people living in French Guiana, qualified as indigenous people of Amerindian and Maroon origin. Firstly, we present the places where these young people live. Secondly, we describe the historical context that led to the emergence of this identity. And thirdly, the research methods we employed and the results we obtained. In the conclusion section, we propose a model of interactive dynamics of identity which best characterizes these young people. Finally, in the discussion, we highlight the contradictions of the concept of indigenousness constructed from a Western viewpoint that no longer corresponds to the reality of these people, whose lifestyles are as modern and dynamic as those of any other population. French Guiana regularly receives migrants from all over the world. Under the influence of these migratory flows, the population doubles every 20 years. The foreign population represents 29.7% of the total population, and 45.63% of inhabitants were not born in French Guiana. What interests us in the present article are the assertions of identity that emerge from those socio-cultural contexts. Numerous socio-cultural groups live in the municipalities where the surveys were conducted, but the study presented here focuses on the identity of students of Amerindian and Maroon descent. They alone are qualified as indigenous. The purpose of this work is not to retrace the genesis of that designation, but rather to understand the historical context that promoted the emergence of those identities and how the students view them and lay claim to them. Before presenting the results of surveys, it seems important to provide a brief presentation of the towns, municipalities and villages covered by our study, as well as a brief summary of the history of these socio-cultural groups in order to examine their political claims. The municipality of Grand Santi is the largest town in the surrounding area. The inhabitants are essentially of Surinamese Njuka Maroon descent. The Maroni River, which constitutes one of the access routes from Saint Laurent, forms the natural border with Suriname. People under 19 years of age represent over 60% of inhabitants. Maripasoula is a municipality located within the French Guiana Amazonian Park. Almost 50% of the population is under 19 years of age. The population is made up of Aluku Maroons, Guiana and Teco Amerindians, French Guyanese Creole, people from continental France, and more recently Brazilians. In Saint-Georges, the following socio-cultural groups are present: French Guyanese Creole, French from continental France, Brazilians, Palikur Amerindians, as well as a few Caripuna. 52.4% of the male population and 52.8% of the female is under 19 years of age. The Amerindian villages Teco and Wayapi of Camopi and Troisseau are located in the southeast, downstream on the Oyapock River, where it meets the Camopi River, and belong to the category of isolated sites. This is a regulated access area. There are roughly 300 students enrolled in the school in the village of Camopi, divided into 12 classes, 3 kindergarten and 9 elementary. Troisseau is the most isolated site on the Oyapock River, with approximately 600 inhabitants in 2011, divided among 4 villages. There are no stores and no telephone service available. Our interviews took place mainly at these 5 sites. Just like French Guiana as a whole, these are multicultural areas that receive a regular migratory influx. Among these populations, those that are designated as indigenous drew our attention: Amerindians and descendants of runaway slaves. In our longitudinal study, 65 semi-structured interviews and 105 questionnaires were conducted over a period of 3 years. A comprehensive analysis of this corpus allowed us to model these young people's representations. Based on their migratory trajectories, families' organization, schooling, attitudes toward multilingualism, and visions of the future. In 1664, French colonists took an interest in French Guiana and attempted to enslave the Amerindians. This attempt failed, and the enslavement of Amerindians was prohibited in 1740. Currently, there are 6 Amerindian groups whose distribution according to linguistic affiliation and the geographic location is shown below. According to estimates, they currently represent 4% of the total population of the department, or roughly 6,000 individuals. There are 4 groups of Maroons living in French Guiana: the Aluku, the Njuka, the Paramaka, and the Saramaka. Today, there are 37 to 100 Maroons in French Guiana. All the Maroons living in French Guiana originated in Suriname. In 1931, the French created the INTE territory, and French Guiana was thus divided into North and South. In 1946, the French Guiana became a French department. Becoming a department strengthened the patriotism of the inhabitants on the coast. Consequently, the Amerindians and descendants of the Maroons in the interior was presented as population to civilize. Thus, the Amerindian and Maroon population, like the Creoles before them, were affected by the assimilationist policies adopted by France. The decree of March 17, 1969 marked an end of the INTE territory. Little by little, the Amerindians and the Maroons acquired the attributes of French citizenship and became subject to its obligations, albeit with certain reservations. At the same time, on the coast, assimilation of Christian French culture was already well advanced. As for the Maroons, having sided with the colonists, most Aluku were French citizens, whereas the Njuka and other Maroons in French Guiana remained until the independence of Suriname in 1975, citizens of the Dutch state. The so-called Frenchification policy carried out by Prefect Vignon contributed through schooling to the emergence, particularly in the municipality of Awala Yalimapo, of an Amerindian elite familiar with the French language and culture. From then on, Amerindians would personally take action on issues pertaining to them. Analysis of designations of Amerindian and Maroon population shows that vocabulary has changed over time. First, savages, then primitive population. The term went on to change from tribal populations to forest-dwelling population. Then the term ethnic group gained ground. Currently, in French Guiana, As a result of the process of revalorization, the descendants of runaway slaves are designated by the terms Noir Marron, Maroons, or Bushinangue, or more recently, Indigenous people. The ideology of indigenous roots originated in the European psyche which, since the discovery of the Amerindian populations, has viewed the latter as having the natural qualities that Europeans supposedly have lost. The statements of the students we met were revelatory of a triptych that constitutes the indigenous French Guyanese identity. On the one hand, they value indigenous culture, while at the same time adopting Western values. 50% would like to leave French Guiana to go and live in continental France. On the other hand, they seek to differentiate themselves from foreign indigenous people, as in the case of the Maroons, for example, where the difference will be emphasized between people of Surinamese nationality and French citizens. Similarly, they will claim their ancestry, while refusing the color of their skin, which they consider to be too dark, an attitude observed among Maroons, or while preferring to transmit the French language to the detriment of their mother tongue, as we observed among the Amerindian we met. All of these paradoxes emerged after analysis of the field data, of which several interviews will now be presented. A summary of the results confirmed, for more than half the young people interviewed, a contradictory stance concerning the question of the future, an attitude most often observed among Maroons but also among Amerindians. 83% of the young people are attached to the concerns of the community, helping their parents, going to work in their agricultural plot, fishing, hunting. With regard to the linguistic question, the survey found that all the students interviewed are bilingual, mother tongue French. In addition, a large majority of them, 87%, mentioned a third language. Some of them say they know it, others just that they understand it. The students were referring to other languages spoken in their village. Concerning the notion of indigenousness, 33 out of 35 Amerindian students stated that they had never heard the word indigenous, and 23 out of 27 Maroon students mentioned local handicraft items. The examples presented confirm the hypothesis of a three-dimensional identity pattern for the young people interviewed. This pattern varies from one person to the next according to the share of traditional French Guyanese and European socio-cultural contributions. But it also varies according to the influence of the young person's close environment as well as other systems. The family values, in particular the importance accorded by their family to the above-mentioned contributions, the family's experience, members of the family who have lived elsewhere and who either live or do not live in the village, the geographic location, the isolation of the village, the contact of the family with the outside world, or the family's socio-economic situation, the share of modernity, electricity, television, etc., and of traditional culture that characterizes the daily way of life of the families, also the concordance of this daily life with the aspiration of the family. We can conclude that most of the perceptions of Amerindians and Maroons in French Guiana ignore the fact that contacts have always existed and will continue because they contribute to the identity of people who construct themselves through exchanges, encounters, sharing, conflicts. It would be more fruitful to support these changes, to teach this migratory history, which is often taboo, to explain how cultural identity is comprehended from a multitude of heritages. It seems that attributing qualities but also flaws to cultures masks individual potential and complicates any attempt to develop a concept of a French Guyanese identity based on territory instead of on racial divisions. Thank you.